I'm Gene O'Hara, the new Monfort Executive Professor Program Director. Lynn Krowski, gentleman down in the front here, retired over the summer, and I'm stepping into his big shoes. I'm just pleased to be joining the Monfort College of Business team. Now, we have some air conditioning issues, as you've probably figured out by now. That's why we have the windows open and so forth. I apologize that it's a little warm in here. Because of that, I don't have my coat on. Our speaker won't be wearing his coat, but it's getting a little cooler with the flow of air coming through the windows. So we're here today for our first Monfort Executive Professor Program Speaking Series of the year. We have another one scheduled for November 8th, and we have 3 of them planned for the next semester. So we're going to have a number of these presentations this year, and we're just pleased to have you here today. Some of you get extra credit for attending this presentation. I want to make sure that you got signed in at the door for your extra credit. Also, we have food for you down in the student lounge after we conclude the presentation. However, let me say, it won't do you any good to get up and leave the presentation early to get to the front of the food line. Because Janie over there is going to have it under lock and key until we conclude the presentation. So you're all invited to come down and have some food when we conclude the presentation. We're so pleased to have today as our speaker Dan Moore, President of the Southwestern Company. The Southwestern Company is one of the oldest companies in the U.S., having been in business operations since 1855. So obviously they know something about running a business. And, Dan is a graduate of Harvard and actually started working with Southwestern Company his freshman year in college, working part-time, and today he's president of the company. So he's got a lot of good experience to share with us. Dan, as I said, is a Harvard graduate. He has an MBA from Vanderbilt. And when Dan speaks with audiences all across North America and Europe, and when he's not speaking, he is actively involved with his company, vetting and incubating new business ideas. He has trained more than 70,000 people on how to run a business, how to lead, and how to get on a path to achieve your life goals. He has a powerful message to share with us today, so help me welcome to the podium Dan Moore.
Thank you, Gene. Let's get all mic'd up here. And thank you, everybody, for coming. We wanted to make this a retro lecture, so we disconnected the air conditioning. I want you to know what it felt like back when some of us were going to college, which is cool. Our company did start in 1855, and most people are amazed at how well preserved I am for a guy that old. But it's kind of fun to have a chance to get up here with you. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. How many of you have never been to Nashville? Okay, what's it famous for? Country music. Usually somebody says Jack Daniels. I'm disappointed. Somebody's going to have that right. But because I live in Nashville, I have a bit of an accent that doesn't always translate to the proper speech of Coloradans and other places where you're from. So I thought we'd better start with a little language lesson. Is that cool? Okay. So how would you pronounce that word? Cheer. Well, actually, in Nashville, that's a cheer. So when someone wants to know, is you cheer comfortable, you'll kind of know what they're talking about. When we get a little bit farther along in school, around age 14, they begin teaching us grammar. You know, nouns, pronouns, etc. And I'm sure as you all learned your grammar really early, you probably remember the second person pronoun in the singular in most of the world is you. Any idea what it is in Nashville? Yeah, somebody's got it. It's y'all. Now that's the singular. And you can imagine, the first time I went to Nashville, this person walked up to me and said, "Hi, how y'all doing?" And I looked around. I was the only guy there. So how do you answer that question when you're alone and someone says, "How y'all doing?" So I said, "I all is fine." That didn't work, so I said, "Well, I all are fine." And that actually didn't work either. So anyway, if that is the singular, how do you suppose you make the plural? No, not y'all's, that's possessive. But if you want to make it plural, it's pretty simple. Just put another all in front of it. So all y'all. And so anytime somebody addresses a group, you know it's going to be all y'all. So are all y'all's cheers comfortable? Okay, good. Just wanted to check on that. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. There is going to be food. And as Gene said, it'll be after the talk. So I hope you can hold out for 7 hours. But we'll see if we can make it kind of fun. Somebody once said that my speaking style is like the cross-eyed javelin thrower at the Olympics. He didn't win any medals, but he sure kept the crowd alert. So we're going to see if we can't do that as well as we can. But since you're here, straight from class, everybody cool for a math test? Yes. Okay, well I think you're going to like this math test because it only has one question. And if you've heard this before, kind of keep it to yourself. But let me get some participation. What is half of 8? Okay, very cool. This is where we get all multimedia. We use the marker. All right, so half of 8 is 4. So we can make the marker mark. 4. All right, and what else is half of 8? Okay, very good. 2 squared. We'll get it. What else is half of 8? Very good. Here is the top half of 8. All right, it's a circle. All right, so what's the bottom half of 8? No, not another circle. It's a 0. And so what else is half of 8? Good. Somebody got 3. There's the right half. And what's the left half? E. But actually, that's not even E. That's our little buddy Epsilon. Remember from calculus? He kept getting smaller and smaller as he chased the limit out to the distance. All right, well, let's look at it a different way. What if we were to kind of take this? Here's half of 8. What would that be? Oh, but I forgot I'm with very advanced students, so you're probably a lot more comfortable with this notation. So we've kind of got that one there. Well, let's look at it yet a different way. If you remember your Roman numerals, here we have a Roman numeral, and what is it? 8. So, now what's half of 8? 6. And what if we look at it this way? Now half of 8 is? No, 11. Okay, and if we look at it this way, now half of 8 is? 5, or maybe 11,111. I showed this to the guy down at Boulder, and he said, "Looks like grass, man." You know, stuff happens. And if we look at it this way, what's the bottom half of 8? 8, yeah, that's obvious, isn't it? Well, let's look at it another way. This is kind of fun. Here we have a word. The word is 8. So if you are halfway through your meal, you could say you've half eaten. But if we were to break this apart, here we have Al. Who likes Italian food? Anybody? So you might have heard of fettuccine al carbone, right? So there you go. And if you take the other half, here you have the direct article in French, masculine, which is le. So let me ask you this. How many answers do we have so far to the question, what's half of 8? Well, I think there's 13 or 14, maybe a few more. And there actually are more, but this is a family program. So this is kind of a fun question to throw out to students. Because when I started by saying, a math exam, several of you immediately went, "Oh, shoot, anything but math." And then I said, there's only one question. You thought, okay, maybe it'd be multiple choice. You didn't know it would be. And then I said, what's half of 8? And I have to tell you, I was gratified and pleased that one person almost immediately knew that the answer was 4. That's cool. And then, when I said, what else is half of 8? Well, I have to tell you, I could feel the empathy pouring off some of you. You say, man, poor Dan must be so jet-lagged. The guy in the back already told him the answer's 4. And I've now had time on my calculator to verify it. Yeah, it's 4, for sure. And then who said the circle? What made you think that?
Just
Very good. So you visualized an 8, and you figured, well, here's half an 8, could be a circle. And once that got going, a few of you started going, ah, you know, that aha moment. Well, obviously, 4 is a correct answer. And how old were you, roughly, when you learned that half of 8 was 4? I was 15. Small school, you know. Roughly. 5 years old? 6 years old? Okay. So go back in time with me. Think back to your kindergarten or first grade teacher. And the teacher said, okay, class, what's half of 8? And you did exactly as you do today in college. You threw your hand in the air, right? And you said, call me, call me. And so the teacher did it, and you said, I know, half of 8 is 3. No, teacher, she's wrong, half of 8 is a circle. No, you're all wrong. No, I know, teacher, half of 8 is look. Parlez-vous français, madame? Now, I don't know if you remember your first grade teacher, but how amused would she have been? Not really. Mine would not have been amused. So you'd be marched up to the board and you would write 20 million times for concluding that math is not your field. 4. Now here's my question. If you were to mark down 4 on an arithmetic test, would it be marked incorrectly? No. All day long you'd get it correct. But on most arithmetic tests, if we put any of these other answers there, we'd have a serious problem. And yet, as you look at these, depending on how you interpret it, aren't they equally correct? In fact, what's awesome about this is that in many of life's questions, there is more than one right answer. And yet many times our schooling has taught us there has to be one. And if you put something other than this, red ink on the page. And so we learn to restrict our thinking. And as a result, we end up with some different answers. But once you open up your thinking, there's lots of cool answers. There are more than one right answer to most of life's questions. Now for some of you, you are totally relieved to hear that. Because you've been dating somebody and you just hope they're not the only right answer. Right? There is somebody else out there. I've got a nerve right here. Okay. So you just want to be aware of that. And as we think about that, we realize that our thoughts often get stuck, and they get stuck based upon our past experiences, our conditioning. Red ink on anything except 4 teaches us, okay, I better say 4, and it's going to lock us in. And as we start to think about our futures, one of the things that's important to understand is that we have to sometimes transcend our conditioning if we want to think differently about our future. And that's a very, very key thing. It's interesting, as Jean mentioned, I had a chance to go to Harvard, and I remember when we got the letter of admissions. Dan's been admitted to Harvard. I was very excited, but it created an immense problem for my family. You see, as a baby, I'd made a huge mistake. I'd forgotten to be born into a rich family. I meant to. That was my plan. I intended, but wrong turn. Anybody here make that mistake? You kind of forgot to be born rich? All right. Well, I did. And my parents were awesome and did a great job, but we couldn't afford it. So my dad wrote a letter and said, Dear Harvard, please send money. Love, Roger. And amazingly, they replied. And they said, well, Dear Roger, we really want Dan to come, so we're going to give him a small scholarship. Now, we have to emphasize that it will be small. But if Dan majors in something like biochemistry, then he might be able to see the scholarship under one of our powerful electron microscopes that we have here at Harvard, because it will really be small. Then we're going to give him a student loan of such breathtaking proportions that Dan and his children and his children's children will all enjoy repaying it over the course of their natural lives. And then to give him a bit of walking around money, we're going to give Dan a lucrative and stimulating part-time job. Oh, I'm sold. This is going to be awesome. So we showed up there, and it was time for check-in for the part-time job. And they found my name and said, Moore. And I said, no, it's Moore. I said, no, you're Moore. Have you ever talked to somebody from Boston? They don't have R's. It doesn't exist, only 25 letters in their alphabet. So when you want to leave your automobile somewhere, they say, go pack your cat. Pack your canny yak. And if you wonder where the R's went, it's actually a gravitational effect. They all fell to West Virginia, where people wash their clothes. Right? So they just kind of end up in strange places. So anyway, they said, Moore, you need your uniform. And so they handed me a white coat. I said, this is promising. This is cool. I'll probably be in a lab doing, Nobel Prize winning research. And then it went downhill from there. Then they gave me a net for my hair. This was the early 70s. And then they gave me a hat made of paper and a name badge, assistant to the dishwasher. Guess where my first job was? Yeah, I was in the dining hall. And the cool thing about being the assistant to the dishwasher is, well, let's see, how many people here have ever lived in dorms and eaten cafeteria food? Okay? You finish with your tray. Do they have a conveyor belt? Yeah. So you walk over, you put your tray on the conveyor belt, and you go off to the world. The conveyor belt comes back here. And did you ever wonder who lives on the other side of the belt? Yeah, that's the domain of the assistant to the dishwasher. And my job was to take the plates and scrape off the leftover food, hand it to the dishwasher, who was a Portuguese immigrant who spoke no English and who hated me. Now, didn't speak, how do we know? Well, how many of you have ever been in a country where you don't speak the language, but you can tell when you're being cussed at, even though you don't speak the language? Yeah, it's that kind of thing. And so it was another student in that dorm that told me about Southwestern, and that led on the path of how I ended up here in Greeley, Colorado. And so what we're going to do is try to talk about your life and sort of where you're headed in some of this context. Now for this exercise, all you need is a piece of paper. Something to write with would help. You can use a device if you want to, but it's sometimes fun to just actually see our own handwriting, that M1 device known as handwriting. And we're going to shift gears. This is the second week of class, is that right? Okay. Anybody already feeling just a bit overwhelmed? Any freshmen in here? Sophomores? Juniors? Seniors? Seniors again and again. Seniors, fine. I'd have 8 or 10 if I were you. Anyway, you're all in different stages, but what everybody here has in common is a big future. And we're going to have a little exercise that you will do just for fun. And in this exercise, there are actually only 3 assumptions that we have to make. 3 assumptions. Has anybody here taken microeconomics? Did they make assumptions there? Like perfect rationality and all those things? In fact, economists, that would be a cool profession. No economist was ever stranded on a desert island. Did you know that? Because all they have to do is assume a boat. And off they go. It's just an amazing experience. But we're going to have 3 little assumptions, and if you will apply these rules, they'll be pretty straightforward. Number 1, I want you to pretend that you already have all the money you'll ever want. So just put a big old $sign, number 1. Already have plenty of money. Now, I don't know how much that is. Do you know how much that is? Do you know how much that is? You get 2 boards if you have enough. So that'll be good. Any idea how much that is? You probably don't know, and that's okay. Just pretend however much it is, you already have it. That you walk out of this room and you trip over an enormous pile of cash, and it's all yours. Okay, it's already got the money. Number 2, why don't you pretend that you knew right now you're going to live to be 120 or more years old? Now, I'm going to assume that you're roughly 20, so basically 100 years older than you are today. Now, I have no idea about your gene pool and longevity in your ancestry, but let's just pretend. Are we cool with that? And then number 3, for this exercise, good news, you don't have to be practical. In fact, you should not be logical, and if you try to get realistic, you won't have any fun with this. So is everybody cool with suspending disbelief? Okay, so we got lots of money, you got lots of time, and you don't have to really have any rationality behind what happens next. So here's your exercise. Given that these 3 things are true, write down all the things you do the rest of your life. And by the way, if you find yourself copying off your neighbor's paper, I'm really worried about you. You might begin with "Get a life." You know, that'd be a good start. Guys in the back are trying to figure out how to spell Beyonce. Quit laughing, girls. We can't spell Gosling either. All right. You don't have to write complete sentences. Just have fun. By the way, you're not going to read this out loud. This is not an oral report. So just have some fun. pause just for a second. Does everybody have 4, 5, 6, 7, some number written down? Okay. Well, without revealing anything you wrote, because this is very personal, what were some of the feelings or emotions that you were having as you were writing? Anybody?
Freedom.
Freedom. Great word.
Excitement.
Excitement. Anything else?
I forgot the word. I don't know. Unexcited, actually.
Unexcited?
Before I started writing something.
Okay, that's fine. You may find this kind of fun. Yeah. On the other hand, is anybody that maybe started to write something and you stopped yourself? See, I've done this many times. You just kind of go, oh no, that won't happen. How about, I don't know if that was legal. You know, so sometimes we stop ourselves and we're not sure why. And when we put the brakes on like that, the creativity process just kind of stops because, yeah. You know, the first time I did this, I remember writing all this stuff down and said, God, that'd be so great. And then almost instantaneously, but it'll never happen. Because remember our past conditioning? What's the first word most children learn to say? If it's not mama, it's no. It's no. If you've ever been around a little child that's just learning to speak, you say, hi, how's your day going? And they go, no. It's just kind of one of the first things that people hear. And so let's talk for just a minute about why we put these 3 assumptions up here. First of all, this one. Any idea why I suggested you start with this assumption? Who's got an idea? Yes?
Well, everything that you want you to, the big things that you want in your life usually cost a lot of money, so that's never a factor. The imagination can go anywhere.
Brilliant. If that's not a factor, the imagination can go anywhere. Because most things are going to involve some amount of money. Even if your main goal is to solve one of society's greatest ills, it's probably going to take some investment of money. But here's what ends up happening. We say to ourselves, what if I hadn't put this? What would most of you have written first? Number 1, yeah, either win the lottery, get to know Walter White, you know, I mean, something like that. You just said, number 1, get money. Number 2, get more money. Number 3, get more money. And then you said, but I'll never have that much money. Game over. And thinking totally shuts down. Now, I am 100% in agreement that to do a lot of stuff you want to do in life does require money. Not the most important things, by the way, but to do a lot of things you want to do does require money. But here's the problem. If we wait to dream until we have the money, then the size of the dreams is forever smaller. Dream the dream first. And be ready to work it really, really hard. Because if you study successes in a wide variety of fields, they didn't wait until they had the money. They started with the dream. Now, there was a kid that started Harvard the same week that I did, but I don't think he was very bright because he actually dropped out and never got a degree. The reason he dropped out is because he was busy playing poker, but in the rest of his time he wrote computer programs. And his friend Paul called him up and said, hey Bill, if we can write the right program to run this new thing called a microcomputer, they can pay us some money. And so he kind of quit going to class and they created code that ended up working. And it was the precursor to something that became known as MS Basic. And does anybody know what I'm talking about? Bill Gates. Now, he is a Harvard dropout. That does not stop Harvard from claiming him as a distinguished alumnus, by the way. I just want you to understand that's the way they work. So you have to ask yourself, well, which comes first? I mean, here you have this guy that's that geeky character and didn't have much more except an idea. In fact, if you study the history of how they developed the first operating system, they actually said, we've got it. And then they hung up and called each other back and said, we better write it. And they created it. It hadn't existed before. In other words, they weren't waiting until somebody taught them how to develop. But they had this vision, they had this dream, they'd worked together before. And they said, how can we make this go? Now, Bill Gates has done pretty well, wouldn't you all agree? He's not the richest guy in the world, but I guess if you gave away $24 billion of your wealth to a charity, that would cut into your net worth a little bit too. But last time I checked, he's worth somewhere around $55 to $60 billion, depending on what the market's doing today. And Bill Gates looks pretty much like he used to. Interestingly enough, he doesn't have the biggest house on Lake Washington. He has a big house, I assure you, but he actually could buy Lake Washington if he wanted to. And I've been by his house. It's beautiful. You have to go really fast on a boat because of the snipers. But it really is an amazing place. But it is far from the most impressive place on Lake Washington. And Bill Gates has already said that he's going to give away 99% of his wealth before he dies. And he spent some of his time convincing other rich people to do the same, including his buddy Warren Buffett. Well, the bottom line of it is, when Microsoft started, their mission statement was really simple. A computer in every home and in every office. That remains their mission statement. And that's kind of funny from a company that doesn't make computers. Nobody necessarily can argue that Microsoft hasn't changed the world. You may not like Microsoft, lots of people don't, but they've changed the world. And so what's Bill Gates doing today? He believes that massive amounts of money invested with thought, intellect, and hard work in the right places on the ground can solve the greatest issues of our world. And that is now his new mission. It's called To Change the World. You see, he hasn't really changed much. He simply changed arenas. That's kind of fun when you think about people that do really well in sports. Does anybody know who this is? This is a little boy. He used to play basketball. And today, for each second, okay, that's the 60th of a minute, for each second that he's on the court playing basketball, he makes $86. He made $17.1 million last year. Does anybody know who we're talking about? His name is LeBron James. And yet when LeBron James was a little kid, growing up in Akron, Ohio, a broken home, a troubled mother, all kinds of problems in the background, do you think that he would just hold a basketball and say, "I'm not going to dribble unless you pay me. If you pay me, I might take a shot"? No. For LeBron James, basketball was not only a way up, but it was his passion. And winning a national AAU championship when he was 16 taught him that there could be something really great in this. But where it came from was the love of the game. It wasn't pay me first and then I'll play. And a lot of people don't like LeBron James. But it's pretty hard to argue with what LeBron James has accomplished. And now, one of my favorite music groups is this bunch of characters known as the Rolling Stones. And the reason I still like the Rolling Stones is because they have been making music, does anybody know how long? For more than 50 years. And they're doing awfully well. And yet, can you imagine when Keith Richards and Mick Jagger were sitting in a garage together? And he'd say, "Keith, play me a chord. Before I make an money. Well, if you pay me, I might sing. I can't sing for any amount of money. What difference does it make?" In other words, that wasn't what it was about. When the Rolling Stones were first getting started, are you kidding me? They couldn't get paid. They couldn't get gigs. They couldn't even get no satisfaction. Sorry, couldn't help that. But they've been together for more than 50 years because they started with the idea that we can make a sound that's going to be different, and who cares if anybody likes it or not. Begin with the dream. And it's amazing what happens over a long period of time, and how people's lives change, and the impact that they begin to have on the world. And yet if people are willing to dream the dream first, then they have a massive impact. You see, the reason this one is so important is because I already told you when I started college, unlimited money was the farthest thing from my imagination. Farthest thing. I already told you we didn't have any money. I owed money to everybody. I owed money to my parents. I owed money to the government. I owed money to the university. I owed my roommate $20. He didn't know. He'd been drinking. He didn't know who was there. Anyway, bottom line is, to expect to have this, that's where you dream the dream first. Is somebody a guitar player in here? You may have heard of Taylor Guitars. The founder of Taylor Guitars had a wonderful quote that I read this past week. Start young. Don't put it off. You don't need financial stability when you're young. Don't waste your life waiting to do it. It only gets harder. If it's too late for that approach, what does he say? You got to work 2 jobs. You just accept that. It's either pay now and play later, or play now and pay later. But sooner or later, you're going to pay. And I challenge you to dream your dream. Don't wait till you, quote, have the money. because it will energize you in the pursuit of your work. And whatever work that is that you do, whether you're in business, whether you're in liberal arts, whatever it is, you will be energized by the power of the dream. And you will do better work. And when you do better work, eventually that's recognized, and eventually that leads to more money. And eventually it leads to being known, and it leads to opportunities. And that's how it all works. Does that make sense to you? So think about it that way. Number two, we talked about, how many of you got a real kick out of this one? Some of you are good friends, and you're saying, this guy is going to make it past 25. Well, there's a couple of simple rules. First of all, don't drive drunk. That's important. Number two, don't date somebody else's spouse. That's important for life expectancy. But the fact is, more people in your generation are going to cross the 100 line than any previous generation that's gone before you. Think about how much stuff we know today about something called exercise. Did you know 110 years ago that was considered bad for your health? Exercise. We know about things called the immune system that they didn't understand before. We understand about nutrition and vitamins. We also understand the connection between attitude and longevity. And there are substantial studies that back that up. There is actually a chemical link between one's attitude and outlook on life and the strength of their immune system. Well, you see, you know all of those things. And so you can expect to have a super long life. And yet what often happens to us is we say, well, getting old, that'd just be so negative. Once you cross like 30, dude, it's over. How do you believe that? You know, it's funny, some of us in this room remember a book by a guy named Jerry Rubin. It was called Don't Trust Anybody Over 30. Well, eventually Jerry Rubin became an investment banker. And when he crossed 30, they said, now what do you think? He said, well, I lied. So the bottom line of it is, what is age about? And I want to challenge you to think, how long should and could your life be if you start taking care of yourself now? I think it can go on and on and on. And let's talk about what this old stuff has done. What's the retirement age in America today? Does anybody know? Official Social Security age? 65. 65. There's talk about raising it. But does anybody know where 65 came from? Why 65? German scientists? Well, I'd like to say it was only German scientists, but it actually went this way. In the mid-30s, when everybody in the world was in the Great Depression, governments began to think about some kind of retirement security for retirees. And they had to pick the age. Pick it too early, you can't afford it. Pick it too late, nobody gets the benefit. So they did exactly what you're talking about. So here's the government announcing this. Attention, people! We have good news. We're going to give you retirement income. Cheer, cheer, cheer. And guess what? We're going to begin paying it when you turn... Hang on a minute. Hey, Albert, the actuary. What's the median dying age of men in America? Cool, thanks, got it. That's 65. You all remember median, right? There's as many before as there are after. So the government's saying, woohoo, we're going to give them retirement income. And when it's time to pay it off, half of them will be dead. But how many of you have been hearing that the Social Security system is in grave danger of bankruptcy? Why is that? People are living, well, that's one way to express it, but I actually think it's because people are not as patriotic as they used to be. And they are simply refusing to die on schedule. You know, if they truly love their country, they would draw stars at 6 o'clock. I'm sorry. You know, and that's the end of that. But people keep on living longer and longer. And so because of this, you should extend your time frame to thinking about stuff you want to do. And start thinking really, really long. Most everybody knows who this guy is. He actually is a colonel. His name really is Sanders. But Harlan Sanders had worked in a job and retired at 65 and was sitting in his rocking chair for 2 years. Now that'd be tough on you, wouldn't it? And there he was. His wife said, Harlan, quit rocking. Go do something. Can't do nothing but make chicken. Well, then go make chicken. So he opened a little chicken place. And guess what? It was good. People came back, invited their neighbors. Then somebody said, well, let's open another one. Well, that'll take money. Well, I'll invest in it. And I think everybody here kind of knows what's happened. He started the business when he was 67. Started it. By the time he died at 92, That little image that you see there was the most recognized commercial image in the world. I got to say, KFC didn't always translate perfectly. When they opened up their first restaurants in Malaysia, they tried to take the slogan and do it word for word. And on the big billboards it said, "Chicken's so good, you'll want to eat your fingers." So it didn't always hit the market exactly right. But he started the business when he was 67 years old. You know what's really fun is when you read about people that are doing amazing things. There's a guy whose last name is Singh who just finished running his fastest marathon. He's 101 years old. He started running when he was 86 to have something to do. He's done 6 London marathons, 1 Toronto waterfront, 1 New York City. He's 101. This young lady here started running at 85, and there she is finishing a Hawaiian marathon at the age of 92. And somebody said to Gladys, "Well, why do you do it?" She says, "Well, I can, so I should." So when you start to think, "Oh, it's too old to do anything," I want to challenge you right now. Develop a mindset that it is never too old. And it's kind of a funny thing what can happen when you start to develop that mindset. So take care of your health, eat right, hang out with positive people, because that's also linked to life expectancy, and figure out how you're going to make yourself go where you want to go. And then who got a real kick out of this one? We don't have to be practical. Did anybody write something down on their list that is not currently technologically possible? Yay! Why'd you do that?
Why not?
Well, why not? Dude, of course. If it's not possible today, doesn't mean it won't be tomorrow. True? Let me ask you something. What are some things that are part of your daily existence that really weren't factors when your parents were your age? A cell phone. All right, a cell phone. Perfect example. We have a good friend named Michelle, and some years ago she called us up and said, "I got to show you something." And she comes over to the house with a backpack, and inside the backpack she pulls out this box. Boom! So what is that? She says, "It's my new portable phone." And she took out a handset that was on a wire, and she says, "Hi, Joel, I'll be home soon. I know, it's expensive. I know, bye. And she goes, "I got to go recharge it. It takes all night, but it lasts almost a half an hour." I hefted the thing. It weighed about 15 pounds. That was the first mobile phone. I think I might have an image. That was the portable phone. Now you all compete to see who's got the smallest and thinnest phone. "Hey man, my phone's so thin, when I open it, it cuts my neck off." I mean, just because it's not possible now doesn't mean it won't be in the future. You've got a cool digital watch there. I like that. Hold that up. Look, and the color's perfect. Check it out. Do you know that there's more computing power on your wrist than existed in the entire world in 1950? You now do. The bottom line is, things are changing so fast. Who wrote down going into space? Congratulations. Now, is that possible for a private citizen to go into space and not an astronaut? Yes. How do we know? Because it's already happened. It's already happened. The first guy to do it was a Utah businessman. His name was Dennis Tito. He'd done pretty well in the money category, but what he wanted more than anything was to go into space. And so Dennis said, "Well, shoot, I'll just call NASA." So he calls NASA and says, "Yo, NASA, how you doing, dude? Yeah, Dennis here. I want to go into space." "No." "Oh, you don't understand. I really want to go into space." "No, you're a private citizen. Forget it." "Listen, I'll pay for the gas. I don't mind. That'd be fine." "No." Now, Dennis was not to be deterred, and so he said, "Okay, hang on a minute. Let me think. I got lots of money. I need a rocket. I got tons of money. I just need a rocket." And then hit him. "I know. I'll call somebody that has a rocket, and they just don't have any money." So we know what his next phone call was? Absolutely. Доброе утро, Москва. Как вы понимаете? Меня зовут Денис, я хочу ехать в космос. Пожалуйста. Congratito. $20 million American dollars. You'll be in space. Очень хорошо. До свидания. And he exchanged the money. He flew and trained with the cosmonauts, and they blasted off from, no joke, Kazakhstan. And he went into space for 8 days, and he had the time of his life, and he's going to go again as a private citizen going up into space. So just because it's not possible today, write it down. Sometime ask your grandparents to show you if they might have a little circular scar on their left shoulder, maybe your parents. I can feel mine right here. You know what that was? It was a vaccine against polio. So he said, well, what's polio? Well, polio used to kill millions of people in the world until somebody named Jonas Salk figured out a way to vaccinate against it. So where's it written that somebody in this auditorium will not find the gene sequence to cure cancer? Could be somebody sitting right here. So just because it's not possible today, dream the dream. Is everybody cool with that? Is this kind of fun? I got to tell you, some goals, unfortunately, just don't make much sense. I got to tell you about poor Larry Walters. Oh, Larry was an unemployed truck driver, and he was kind of depressed. So his favorite activity was to sit in his backyard in a lawn chair. Any of your parents have those aluminum kind where they unfold and they got the little straps, and he'd sit there and drink beer. Bitter, bitter. And then one day he said, you know what would be cool? See, if this lawn chair could float. So he had some more beer. He got to think about it. He said, well, what could make this balloon float? I mean, this chair. He gave you the answer. This is way before up. So he said, I'm going to get some big old balloons. So he got all excited and he went down to a scientific supply house and he bought the kind of balloons that take weather instruments high up into the altitude. And he said, I want to make sure I can get up, but I only want to get up about 15 feet. And that was his vision, was to fly about 15 feet above his neighbors, wave at them, drink beer, eat his lunch, he thought this would be so cool. So he went down, he bought, now Larry, this is Larry in his chair. And you notice quite a few ropes there. Somewhere up there, there's a beer, we're pretty sure. But Larry, unfortunately, was a little over-enthusiastic when he was buying his balloons. This is what the array looked like when poor Larry attached 48 of these incredibly powerful high-altitude balloons, and there's Larry at the bottom. How many of you can already guess what's about to occur? See, Larry thought he would cut the cord and just kind of gently float about 15 feet. Imagine his shock when he cut the cord, and within 5 minutes, he was 16,000 feet above Southern California. In a lawn chair. 16,000 feet. First of all, what's the air like up there? Thin and cold. All right, he forgot his parka. So he's up there freezing. And guess what else they don't equip lawn chairs with? Steering wheels. So he's just buffeted, blowing around, and he blew over LA International Airport. Busiest airport on the West Coast. Yeah, San Tower, this is Delta Flight 209er, requesting clearance to land. Yep, all good up here. OMG! There's a guy in a lawn chair. Eventually the balloons lost buoyancy, Larry hit the ground, and he was arrested and given a ticket for violating LA International airspace without a permit. So some goals make no sense. My biggest hang-up with this goal-setting thing was feasible and practical and realistic. I used to think, no, there's physical limitations, you've got to be stopped. And then our son came home from a mission trip. He'd spent a week helping people, and at night there were speakers and musicians. And he said, Dad, you're a guitar player, and we had this awesome guitar player and singer. I bought his CD, and I want you to hear him pick. So I said, okay. So we're going to do just a little clip here and see if we can make our system work. But anyway, it's just awesome stuff. But I said, hey, no, that's good picking. And he said, Dad, there's more. And he showed me his book. What do you notice is unusual about Tony Melendez? What you just heard was a man playing the guitar with his toes. See, Tony Melendez was born in Central America in the early 60s. And his mother had taken a drug, very popular at that time, to combat morning sickness. The drug was called thalidomide. And people didn't know that thalidomide could lead to horrific birth defects. So Tony Melendez was born with sockets but no arms. Now the doctors all said to his parents, he needs to be in a home. His parents said, nonsense. He's our son. And they raised him with his siblings, and Tony did pretty much what other kids did. The only difference is, when we're all learning to walk, we fall, don't we? And when we fall, what do we instinctively do? So imagine if you couldn't do that. First, Tony learned to play the piano with his toes. And then he said, you know what, I think I'm going to take on the guitar. It's portable, it can be a chip magnet. Tony Melendez once played a private concert for Pope John Paul II. He's released several albums, he's written 2 books, he's married, he's got 2 kids. And my favorite song on his album is called Hands in Heaven. And he sings about how he's looking forward to getting to heaven so that for the first time he can give his mother an embrace. Ever since I learned about Tony Melendez, I guess I quit worrying about if something was practical or realistic or feasible. And a really fun event in my life happened last November when I crossed the finish line in the New York Marathon, and I beat more than half the field. And I said, you know what? If a 56-year-old guy can do that, inspired by somebody like Tony Melendez, people need to understand that they can do what they said they wanted to do. Ready for a shift of gears? Now that we've been way into space and in the future and solving the world's problems, guess what? You have to get good grades this semester. So let's bring it back to Earth. Is that okay with everybody? Let's do 1 second. Everybody stand up real quick. Get your best bodybuilder pose. Look out that window and say, my future's unlimited! Tony, my future's unlimited! Chickens, wimps, try it. My future's unlimited! Ah, you guys need help. All right, have a seat. We got to get you to your future, so I got to get you through this semester first. Everybody cool with that? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to make this your best semester ever. Who's down for that? Best semester ever. So let's see if we can do it. This is called the U in university. I can't spell very well, but I think the word university is spelled with a Y-O-U at the beginning. And this is about you. Success in College 101. First of all, let me throw a question to you. Why on earth should you throw yourself into these years and do the very best you can? Any ideas? Like one idea. Why do your best? A better career? Those things you wanted on that earlier list? Comment from you? Accomplish your goals in life can start now. Okay. These are unique years in your life. Who would agree with that? Who finds college has been kind of a blast? Yeah. But some of you are getting close to the end of it, and so now the only logical thing is graduate school. I really enjoy this. 5 PhDs, go for it. But the fact of the matter is, why do well? Because it is about your future. And doing well in college is not just about your GPA. It's about everything else you can learn while you're here. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, they put together a list of 10 things employers are looking for in graduates. And here they are. Here's their list. What's number 1? Communication skills. They're looking for people that can look out the window and say, my future's unlimited! You say, oh, we don't have to do that. Well, you might not have to, but if you did, it'd be nice to know you could. Communication skills, motivation, and initiative. An example of initiative for a college student is when the professor says, who would like to present an oral report at the next class? It's amazing how many shoes come untied at that moment. But if you were to simply raise your hand in the air without thinking, don't think, just raise your hand in the air, you've suddenly taken initiative. And when you do something like that, don't be surprised that you also now have motivation. It works together. Teamwork skills, leadership skills. GPA is important. It's ranked 5th on the list. That's not bad. But it goes on from there, interpersonal skills. You know, one of the things I hope all of you are is a member of a different clubs. Not with your same group of cluster friends, but with people that you don't spend much time with. To learn to communicate interpersonally with people that are unlike you. Flexibility and adaptability. Whew, you want to have a little fun exercise on that one? How many of you in past semesters would pick your seat in a lecture and pretty much always sit in the same one? Are they assigned seating? No, you just pick your seat. So if you want to see if somebody else is flexible or adaptable, wait a few weeks when everybody's really well established and get there early. If this guy always sits here, just get there early and grab his seat. Watch what happens. He'll come in and go, dude, you're like in my seat. And just look innocently and say, your seat. I didn't see your initials on it or a reserve ticket in the back or anything. I just thought I'd sit here and anyway, a lot of people aren't very flexible even at your age. So practice adaptability and flexibility. Technical skills, honesty and integrity. And look at this. Work ethic and problem-solving skills are as high. Well, you can find this list from your career center. You have an awesome one here at the business school. And if you're in the other colleges, they have awesome career centers. So now you have a list of what employers are looking for. Go find ways to tick those boxes. That's my first suggestion. GPA is important. You noticed it's in the top 5. And so figure that out. What does success at college look like? Well, in many cases, it is your resume, provided that resume actually has substance and not just a bunch of clothes. People that look at resumes professionally understand that there are resume addicts. These are the people that love to put bullet points on their resume. But if they ever drill in on one of them and they say, so what do you actually do in the spelunking club? Oh, well, went to the first meeting. They're looking more for depth and not just for breadth. So see if you can figure out how you can grow that. Academically, what does success look like? How do we measure it? Diploma, all right. And 3 magic letters, GPA. And even though we talked about how things can technologically be possible in the future, unless you're a computer hacker, there's one thing you'll never be able to change the rest of your life. And that is the GPA that you graduate with. You will have it the rest of your life. It's a marker, not of intelligence. It tends to be a marker of discipline. And one of the things that people look for is how disciplined are you? Now sometimes students start a new semester and they say, okay, I'm definitely going to get that 4 point. And who's ever started a semester with that? This semester is going to be different. I was younger then. I know I partied a lot. This one is going to be different. And has anybody ever had the experience of sort of deflation of your goal as the semester goes on? Well, this class doesn't count. It's not even in my major. This one, bad professor. So the courses I love with good professors, that's my target. You have a GPA. I want to challenge you to set a specific goal for what that GPA is going to look like. There's something about the human psyche that when we have a specific goal, we energize around that goal. Who's ever had that experience at the end of a semester, just during finals? A sudden burst of energy created by fear. Fear usually of dad. Right? I mean, you have massive energy, don't you, in finals week? A lot of you don't even drink coffee. You just get a can and a spoon and just kind of chew it because it's more efficient. Let's stay awake and learn and learn and learn and learn. I want to challenge you to set that goal early in the semester. Pick a GPA goal and target it. Because when we target a goal, we gain drive and we gain energy. Who here, for example, plays team sports? Anybody do a little soccer? Basketball? Okay, got some basketball players. You're a basketball player, right? Let's say you picked 4 of the guys. This guy over here picks 5 guys, and you head out to the court to play. You're ready to go. And you say, okay, we get the first out, so you got the ball. You dribble down the court, you look up, and you realize somebody stole the basket. So you're so dumbfounded, the other team steals the ball, they dribble the length of the court, somebody stole that basket too. How thrilling would basketball be with no goals? That'd be cool. Well, let's just throw the ball. Let's bounce the ball. Or who's done some bit of soccer maybe back in high school? Competitive soccer, okay. How long is a soccer match if you're in there the whole time? 90 minutes. Have you ever been in a match where with about a minute to go, the score was tied, and it could go either way, and it is so close, and this crowd's screaming? What's your energy level like at that point? It's through the roof, which makes no logical sense. You've been running like a maniac up and down a 110-yard pitch for 90 minutes. You'd think at the end of the match, everybody be on their knees, pushing the ball with their nose on it. You take it. So I don't want it. But because we have a goal, we're energized. If you've ever spent a weekend where you said, this weekend, I'm just going to do nothing. Man, I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to get up extra early so I can start doing nothing. You come out of those weekends more exhausted than a weekend where you go do a few things. Goals provide energy, so set a specific goal for that GPA. Now let's talk about when. There's something everybody in this room has an exactly equivalent amount of. No more and no less. And every human that's ever walked the earth has had exactly the same amount. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Very good. But I've actually increased it a bit since we have a week to think about. We all have 168 hours in a week. We have no more. We have no less. And yet, how many of us have ever said, oh, I ran out of time? We all use that phrase. But whoever said, I wish I had more time? We all use that phrase. But we have the same. And here's what's amazing. Some people with their 168 hours a week change the course of mankind. But for most people, it's as if they stuck their fist in a bucket of water and pulled it out and tried to check and see what kind of hole they left behind. You know, something might have been there, but you don't know what it was. Decide that your 168 hours a week are going to mean something, and that they will amount to something important. I don't believe it's about time management, frankly, because you can't manage time. Unless you can get a hold of the face of the clock and actually move that thing, time is what it is. But what you can do is learn to manage yourself. And the fundamental of self-management ties back to having that goal. When the why is strong enough, the human figures out the how. Next state over from here, the guy was about to die because his arm was pinned under a rock. And after 127 hours, what did he do? You see, when the desire to do something is strong enough, you find a way. I hope none of you ever go through that. But when we have those specific goals and we learn to manage ourselves, it's important. So let me ask you a little what-if scenario. What if I could teach you a simple system that would let you get all A's and B's, and that would let you have all your evenings free and all your weekends totally free? Who's down for that? We good? Ready for it? I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to graphically represent it. Here it is. What we're graphically representing on the board is a week. 168 hours. And part of that week is highlighted in red. Which part is highlighted? 8 to 5. Which days? Monday through Friday. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. That sounds like a what? A job. Guess what? You win the cookie. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. Between those hours marked off in red, allow yourself to be in exactly one of two places. Number one, in one of your classes. Ideally, something you are registered for. I know the one down the hall is more interesting, but ideally the one you're registered for. And number two place you allow yourself to be is a quiet place of study. And that's it. Pack a lunch in the morning so you don't have to get distracted going off to lunch. And that's it. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. In class, or a quiet place to study. And now I feel waves of disbelief coming across. Let's talk about why this works. Let's say that a student's first class is at 10 in the morning. On Monday. What time does the typical student get up for their 10 o'clock class? He said 9. Now we're getting real reality back there. 9:30. And what's real reality? 10. Yeah, okay, it could be 10. But you know what? It's kind of subjective, isn't it? Well, Dan, it all depends. It depends if it's a class I can't afford to miss. Again. Or if there's someone that will take notes. But then again, if it's raining, all bets are off. You know, it's kind of subjective. Well, if the typical student kind of shows up at the class at 10, they haven't had much breakfast, or maybe their breakfast was, hey, some Cheetos, oh, some beer left in this can, there's breakfast, okay, so it's left. And then they sit down, and then that's how it works. Well, let's think about you if you're on the 8 to 5. You drag yourself out of bed at 7:30, you actually have something nourishing to eat, with a little water on your face, and you say, let's do this thing. And you sit down and you actually start studying from 8 to 10. And it would make sense to study the subject matter for your 10 o'clock class. How many of you have ever walked into a class and your brain seemed like it was frozen? And it took you half the lecture to catch up to where the lecturer was. You spent 2 hours reviewing before that class. Your brain is already tracking with the lecturer. You get there early, pick out a good spot. And I'll talk about seating here in just a few minutes. When the class ends at 11, let's say the next class is not until 3. What does the typical student do? Yes! They got 11 to 3, perfect time for a nap. I mean, education can totally get in the way of your sleeping schedule. So they either go back home and and take a nap. Or they head off to the union. Do you have any really comfortable chairs in your union? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you sit in them and you sink and you sink and you sink and you don't stop sinking until every round you speak a Mandarin. You know, it's just really comfortable. You, on the other hand, class is over at 11, stroll over to your quiet place to study. Now, who's ever had homework assigned in a class on Monday that's due Wednesday? Right, problem sets or whatever. So when does a typical student start the problem sets? Wednesday morning or Tuesday night, right? What happens to your memory between a lecture Monday morning and trying to do the homework Tuesday night? 36 hours have passed. You will have forgotten more than 90% of what you heard Monday morning. You'll have forgotten it. And if you've ever pulled your notes out and looked at them a day and a half later, who wrote these? These are hieroglyphics. I think I'm out of microphone here somehow. These are hieroglyphics. These aren't notes. Well, if you go sit down, wouldn't it be remarkable to actually start your homework within 5 minutes of when it was assigned? I know I'm speaking heresy now. But if you were to do that, your brain would still be tracking with the lecture. If you did 2 or 3 of the problem sets or 2 or 3 of the little reading examples, you would do it so much more efficiently, so much faster, and your head would be there. You keep this cycle up until 5 o'clock, and here's what's awesome. At 5 o'clock, it's as if the factory shift had ended. Woo, shift is over, and you're done. That's when you can start having some fun. Because then you go haunt your friends. You walk around at night saying, hey, you guys want to go out? Oh, I'm sorry. You have to study. And by the way, this is all about how to create mystique. Mystique's important in life. And they say, hey, you want to go out dancing? Oh, got that test. Hey, no problem, I'm going out. Hey, you want? Oh, I know. I feel for you. I'm going to go. And then they begin talking about you. Man, that guy, that girl, you know, she gets all A's and B's, and she never studies. She never studied. And why would they conclude you never studied? Because you've never been witnessed studying, because when you're studying, they're sound asleep. Now, I don't know about you, but I always found it was more fun to get in trouble at night than in the middle of the day. And so it's kind of fun to have this. Now, here's what you're going to discover. If you will follow this really simple schedule, you'll actually discover it's too much time. You'll get to 3 in the afternoon, and you'll have done all your work. You're like done. But since you're locked in until 5, now you do really weird things, like read the suggested optional reading and do the additional practice problems. I mean, weird stuff. And I'll tell you in a second how that will help your mystique also. And then 5 o'clock, you go off and have some fun. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Now, here's what some of you are thinking. Damn, my situation's different. I have labs, or I'm in ballet. Listen, I agree with you. Every one of you is different. So if you have a part-time job that you have to do in the middle of the day, or you have extra labs, that's okay. Adapt. Adapt. You might have to extend this up into the evening. Adapt. But make the core this 8 to 5 concept, the core. And if you'll do that, you'll see some tremendous benefits. And I'll be glad to send you an Excel file of basically your whole week. You can just plug in when your activities are and lock in that 8 to 5. That is your golden, sacred time. You want to preserve that. Now, the next thing that I said, we talked about 168 hours. Part of this relates to sleep. When does a typical college student go to sleep? You know what? It doesn't really have a definition. It all depends. How many hours of sleep are you supposed to get a night? 8. And I think most college students actually average 8 hours of sleep a night. They get 2 hours one night and 14 the next. So on the average, they're getting their 8 hours. But a suggestion would be to focus on at least Sunday night through Thursday night, trying to get to bed before midnight. Let me tell you why. Most issues that pertain to sleep disorders in adulthood have been traced back to starting in high school or college. So learn to get on a proper sleep schedule now. It's a radical idea, I know. What I'm advising you to do is go to bed today and wake up tomorrow. Because most college students go to bed tomorrow and wake up tomorrow. So if you'll do that, it'll make a huge difference. Now, we spoke a minute ago about having a quiet place to study. How many of you study in the library? That might work great for you. How many of you study where you live? Your apartment or home? Okay, here's my suggestion to you. Change that starting today. What? Well, I like to study at home. That's where my stuff is. That's the problem. That's where your stuff is. You walk into your home, to study and work hard, which one's going to win about 9 times out of 10? Let's get real about it. You walk in intending to study. How often does that get interrupted by somebody that drops in? Or the music that starts calling to you even when it's not turned on? Or the million and one distractions? My advice is, let your place of living be your place of living. Find a place somewhere away from home, quiet, to study. Make it as boring as possible. At Harvard, the library was a social center, so that didn't work very well for me. But what I did discover is that beneath the geology department was the geology library. I was a political science major. I didn't know anything about geology. But most of the geology majors didn't even know there was a geology library. And there was no one there. As far as I could tell, there was no employee there. And in the geology library, this was the sum total of the distractions. They had this little dinosaur skeleton, they had a human skull. And every time I tried to get distracted, hey, I'm going to go read a cool magazine. I grabbed a magazine, it would be Plate Tectonic Journal, or other similarly interesting things. So I just named the dinosaur Dino, put a little bit of hair on the skull, called him Wilson, and just went to work. And I got so darn much done. And when I would emerge from the geology dungeon at 5 o'clock, a free man, and that final year at my university, was the best grades I ever got. The most activities, the most fun, had a girlfriend, and played lead guitar in a rock band. It was really a fun year. Quiet place to study. Make home fun. Make work work. We're doing that again. So a couple of quick tips. I'm going to give you 3 specific ideas. Number 1, the 2-minute drill. Football players are kind of familiar with that. But here's what I mean by 2-minute drill. We said before, most students show up for a 10 o'clock class either right at 10 or a few minutes after. And they come stumbling in, oh no man, I'm like, wait, do I have the right book? Oh, no, wrong book. Oh, you know, they're just kind of freaking out. I want to advise that you come 2 minutes early. Now you don't have to sit in the front row, but you have a cool factor to maintain. But where these 2 are is where I would recommend. 2nd row, maybe 3rd. And you get positioned where you're near the professor. And the way you take notes is like this. If you're way in the back where all the school guys are sitting, there's no way you're going to even get noticed. But if you're up close, some amazing things can happen. Come 2 minutes early, but most importantly is review your notes so that your brain is tracking. And then the other part of the 2-minute drill is stay 2 minutes after. Who's ever been so busy taking notes that you have a bunch of halfway written notes? You've been there? And then you pull them out later and it says this. It's got stars on it. It says, important for the exam, remember to... You didn't get the note finished. So if you stay 2 extra minutes, you can finish those notes. Don't have a bunch of half notes. I mean, the music majors take quarter notes. But make sure that you get half of that done, and then the other half. Plus, if you stay 2 extra minutes, the professor's usually still in the room picking up their stuff. And if you're confused, you can walk up and say, excuse me, professor, I have a question. That's the time to answer your question. Is that cool? Here's the second thing. I don't know if any of you read it in the news, but there was a recent finding. It came out of the Human Genome Project. They discovered that more than 90% of college professors are human descent. In other words, they're awesome people. And what often happens is we fail to understand that our professors have a point of view as well. It's the beginning of the term. How many of you think that last weekend, your professors went to bed super early Sunday night and jumped out of bed Monday morning, did about 50 quick push-ups, ran to the mirror and said, you good-looking academic, today's the day that you're going to influence 160 young lives. You're going to put them on a course toward a quest for knowledge and a thirst of experience. You're going to provide them with the epistemological basis for their existence that will change them forever. Well, probably not. Someone probably said, okay, here we go. 8 years of trying to get tenure. Number 9, let's kick it off. Let me think. I got 160 students this term. Based on past experience, I will not even see 40 of them. They will never appear in my lecture. About 30, I'll only see the tops of their heads as they fold their arms at the beginning of class and go to sleep. About 30, I'll have serious worries about whiplash injuries as they take notes. I'm concerned for their health and safety. About 25, I'll only hear them texting. And maybe 10 will be looking at me with thinly veiled homicidal intent. I'm excited. Let's start this semester. So the professor walks into the classroom, and the first 2 or 3 rows are vacant. Vacant. People are clustered toward the back. What are you saying to the professor without saying a word? We don't want to be here. We don't like you. Keep your distance. And somebody said, well, my professors aren't very friendly. And you're the guys that sit in the back row. Come down here. Make eye contact. Be human. Be responsive. Do things like nod. Have a facial expression. You're not in Vegas playing poker. It's okay to have a facial expression. Here's something else about professors. They like people that like to learn. So when the professor says, are there any questions? What's the most often asked question, by the way, in the typical college classroom? You may know. Will this be on the exam? That is the most commonly asked question. So what I'd suggest you do to expand your mystique is when they say, are there any questions, just kind of snake your hand in the air and say, yes, professor. I was just wondering, in optional reading number 3, if you agree with Hammerstein's point of view, or if you think Waldschmidt was more correct in suggested reading 5. You're going to have a blast. 2 things will happen. First of all, the rest of the class will quit. They'll just give up. Game over. We'll all wrestle it out for number 2. She wins. And then you'll see your professor, and they'll light up. Some of them might not light up. They may start doing their best Billy Flynn because they don't remember optional reading 3. It's been 20 years since I read it. But you will have established that you're a player. Here's another suggestion about professors. And I taught adjunct faculty in graduate school. I know about this stuff. How many of your professors have office hours? When does the average student go to office hours if they do? After the test or at the end of the semester when their butt is in a crack. Can I make a suggestion? Time to go to office hours is this week. This week. Now, the professor will be sitting in there, probably, playing wastebasket basketball, because nobody comes in. Knock at the door, and they'll go, huh? Yes. Say, Professor Johnson, this your office hours? Yeah. Well, I'm Dan Moore. I'm enrolled in your 202 class. Can I step in for a second? Yeah. It's the beginning of this. What do you want? What do you need? He said, I don't need anything. I'm just planning on a career in corporate finance someday, and your course is Fundamentals of Finance. And I just wondered, do you have 1 or 2 suggestions that can help you get the most out of your class? I've got to tell you, that question is asked about once per 10,000 students. You sit there and have a great chat, get to know that person, and you will have a big impact on understanding where she or he is coming from. I've been around college students my whole career. Somebody would say, my professors are boring. No, they're not. They just might not like talking to groups. Get together with them one-on-one. They're fascinating. They're a depth of knowledge. Some of them are funny like you've never believed. Get to know them as humans. You know why else? Most of you, when you graduate, are going to need something called a letter of recommendation. So would you like your letter of recommendation to be, to whom it may concern? According to my records, student XYZ was in my lecture in the spring of 2012. Or, it is a pleasure to write this recommendation about Mary Steverson. Mary was always punctual, prepared, asked excellent questions, interested in the outcome. How many of you see the difference? So decide that that's important to you. Finally, use what you're paying for. You have brilliant facilities here at UNC. And yet there's some people in this room that struggle with numeracy. Arithmetic and math never caught with you, and you've been hiding it for a long time. Go seek out some help. There are people here that are paid by your tuition dollars to help you. If you struggle with reading, they have reading specialists that can help you do that. Use everything you're paying for here. Please go to the Career Center. You know what their biggest complaint is? Students walk in 1 week before graduation. Hey, dude, I'm graduating. You got my job? Get to know them. Let them get to know you. Start early. Use every single thing that you're paying for. Fundamentally, and we're wrapping up with this, how you coach yourself is so important. This is what's called self-talk. Has anybody heard the word self-talk before, that phrase? Self-talk. First of all, let me tell you what it's not. It's not getting in front of a mirror and saying this over and over. I'm a tiger. Besides, you're the Bears, right? So, see, you don't want to do it that way. If you look in a mirror too long, something awful could come out of the mirror. And you don't want to have that experience on your mind. So it's just a bad thing. So don't affirm being a tiger for very long. But what good self-talk is, woke you up, didn't I? What good self-talk is really self-coaching. Self-coaching. It's that voice of reason when all around you have already lost their mind. And learn how to talk to yourself in a constructive manner. Ultimately, the people we hang out with have a big impact on us. My grades improved when I hung around with people who cared about grades. My grades went down the toilet when I hung around with people who don't care about partying. And I learned to hang out with party people on the weekend, good grade people during the week. So watch your associations. What if you get in a serious hole? You get way behind. What's rule number one if you're in a hole? Yes, stop digging. Here's what happens to some students. They get their midterms back. They're disappointed with the result. They go, oh, I'm way off my goal. Oh, well, party! Go ahead and get some help. Get some tutoring. Make that work. Now we're going to close and get what you really came for. Lunch. Years ago, a man named Dr. Robert Fulgham wrote a book called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Awesome book. What Fulgham didn't realize is that book would make him a celebrity. He was being asked to speak all over the country. But being a small-town minister, he just said, no, I don't want the spotlight. I just want to write books. But the requests kept coming. And finally he said, all right, I'll speak to two kinds of groups. I will speak to kindergarten children. I'll owe them a lot. And I'll speak to college students. And when I read that, I thought, this guy's a genius. Because it meant he could fly into a town in the morning and talk to the kindergarten kids when they're fresh. And then that evening, he could talk to the college kids when they just got out of bed and they're fresh. But he'd always get in front of the kindergartners, and they were always kind of wired. They'd give them, Lorna Dooms and apple juice, and they were pretty stoked. And he'd say, children, how many of you can sing? Let me ask you something. How many of you have little people in your life, nieces, nephews, etc.? If you ask a wired 5-year-old if they can sing, what's going to happen? They're going to say, yeah, let's do the Lion King. I'll be Simba. You can be Scar. And away they go. Cool. Well, kids, how many of you can dance? They don't raise hands. They jump up. And how do you do the funky chicken on your head? They go for it. And he said, well, awesome. How many of you can draw? And the kids say, draw. Oh, I love to draw. They look at the board and they say, look, 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 look. And so what is it? He said, it's my house and my brother. His name is Billy, and we have a dog and a ball, and that's my lunch. And then they tear it off and say, I made it for you. Later that evening, Fulgham would go to university, and there'd be 2,000 students in a huge auditorium, packed, except the front 2 rows, which were completely empty. And Fulgham would say, students, how many of you can sing? You'd see a couple hands go up, and the guys said to each other, oh, you sing in the shower. You sing when you're drunk. Just a couple hands. Then he said, well, how many of you can dance? 2 or 3 brave souls would raise their hands. Oh, no, I don't dance. I got the beats and stuff, but I don't really dance. Well, how many of you can draw? A couple of artists would raise their hands. The rest of them, oh, no, I don't really draw. I'm kind of text-based. I don't really draw. Fulgham would look at this crowd of students and say, what? This happened. What's happened? When you were 5, you could do anything. Now you're 20. You can't even sing. You can't dance. Well, I think we know what happened. Somewhere between little and bigger, we learn a new skill. The skill is called how to be embarrassed. You ever notice that babies are not born knowing how to be embarrassed? When was the last time you saw an embarrassed baby? I mean, babies only do 4 things. They eat, they sleep, they cry, and they generate food. I mean, they're good at it. And you go up and say, oh, I can't blame the baby. Say, you like that? Want more? And they're proud. Babies don't blush. Then they learn, and then we get embarrassed. And personally, I think some kinds of embarrassment are good. If it embarrasses you to think about playing ultimate frisbee, let fear of disapproval, fear of ridicule, keep you from being who you know you're really meant to be. You have unlimited potential. Go for it. You deserve it. Thanks so much for being here today. Love being with you. Who's for some food?
Thank you, Dan. On behalf of the students and faculty of Monfort College of Business, we want to thank you for traveling all